Not all white people are the same. So I don't like to be. I don't like to see that or read that on the internet where you have Indian people saying, "Well, that's see us Indians are this way and the Wasicu are that way, and that's why they're bad." And that's racist because that's not true at all. Yeah, they're good and bad. That doesn't. That's not because of somebody's skin color. Okay, that has nothing to do with that. Because I've grown up on the reservation most of my life. I have seen good Indians and I have seen bad Indians too. Same thing with the white people. I grew up in a very small town on Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation called Dupree, South Dakota. And the town is about half white and half native. And there's a lot of racism in this town, but it comes from both sides. Okay, and I have had good experiences with white people in this town. Not all of them, but I have. So I know this. I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I've experienced it. You know, I've had people help me. Um, I like to tell this one story, and I won't tell all of it. But several years ago, before I moved to Germany, so I guess that was like 20 years ago. It's a long time ago. Gee, that's right. That's 20 years ago. Oh my gosh, time's really flying. Yeah, about 20 years ago, I was driving with a friend, a lady friend from Rapid City. We were going to go to Bear Butte, and here my car broke down on the interstate, I-90, coming out of Rapid City, going towards Sturgis. It was a Saturday afternoon, and there were cars driving by, and nobody stopped to help me. I was standing outside the car. There were even cousins of mine from my reservation that drove by, and they would slow down, and they would look at me, and then they just took off. None of my cousins stopped to help me. Nobody from Cheyenne River stopped to help me. Yeah, so I was getting kind of bummed out because of that. I was like, wow, thought Indians stick together. I guess that's not true. So I sat in the car, and this is the days before cell phones. So I was like, huh, well, just wait till a state trooper pulls up and see what see what happens. Yeah, because what can I do? Because you can't hitchhike on the interstate. That's against the law. So um, sat there and here a pickup pulled up from behind, and I looked in the mirror and it was a white guy, and I was like, oh no, oh shoot, a redneck guy's pulling up. No man, this don't look too good. Yeah. And guy came out, and I got out of the car, and he said, "Oh, it looks like you're having some difficulties." I said, "Yeah." So I popped open the hood, and he took a look at it, and he said, "Yeah, I don't know too much about cars, but this looks like you have some oil leaking pretty bad." He said, and I said, "Yeah, I don't understand that." I said, "Because I just had an oil change not too long ago." And he said, "Well, maybe the mechanics didn't do something right." So I said, "That's possible." So he said, "I can take you to a telephone, uh, you know, and if maybe you can call AAA or somebody or something." So I said, "Yeah, I have an uncle who lives nearby." And so he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, why don't you guys come in? I'll take you to the nearest telephone, and you can call your uncle and you know, get some help." So I said, "Okay." So he took us, yeah, to a truck stop, and he fed us. Yeah, I called my uncle and told him what happened. He said, "I can." My uncle said, "I can be there in a half hour." And so I said, "Okay, cool." So I told him which truck stop I'm at, and stuff like that. So he said, okay, I'll see you in about a half hour. So I said, okay. So I told that to this white guy. This he was a cowboy, yeah, he's a rancher, old guy, yeah, and so he bought us lunch, yeah, he bought us lunch and talked with us for a while. He wanted to make sure we're okay. Yeah, he wasn't gonna leave until my uncle arrived. And so he stayed with us. We visited for a while. We were talking about the weather and things like that. He was a really nice guy. And then yeah, 30 minutes later, my uncle showed up and he came in, and so this old guy said, "Oh, okay. Looks like your uncle is here, and I hope everything continues on the upside for you," he said. And I thanked the guy, man. I shook his hand and I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. No problem," he said. And my lady friend shaked his hand too and gave him a hug and kiss, and he liked that. And then he went about his way. Yeah. And so my uncle took us to where the car was, and he had a tow truck. Yeah. So he hooked up the car and took us to safety. So, my friends, you cannot tell me Wasicu people are bad. Yeah. Because in this story, nobody from Cheyenne River stopped to help me. No Lakota people stopped to help me. And instead, a white guy stopped and he helped me. And my uncle is a white man. Yeah. He married my mother's sister. Yeah. His name is Gerald Frame. He married my Auntie Phyllis. It's my mother's younger sister. And this guy is a good man. He's a good man. He was good to his family. He's good to our family. He was always good with my mother. And when he came to help me, he was good with me too. And that was a white man. Okay? So all you Indians out there, when you're saying that, well, white people are bad, think twice about that, because what you're really saying is a racist thing. Yeah, and that's not true. Not all white people are the same. Yeah, and usually people who think like that are close-minded. They're all they know is the reservation. They've never been off the reservation. If they have, they haven't been off too long. Maybe they just go shop in some city or something. But then they never really lived off the reservation. I'll give you another example. Historical. Okay, here in Europe, in the United Kingdom, you have several countries involved. You have England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and at one time, the Republic of Ireland. That's the south part of the island. Okay? And this used to be the United Kingdom. And there is a difference in these people. Yeah? Irish people and Scottish people are not the same as British people. The Irish people and Scottish people were oppressed by the British. The British treated the Irish and Scottish people just like the way America treated Indian people. Yeah? And Irish people and Scottish people are tribal people. Yeah? They come from the Celtic people. British people don't come from that. British people come from the Germanic tribes. Okay? That's why they're more I don't know, more oppressive. Irish people and Scottish people are descendants of the Celtic culture. The Celtic people were tribal. They all look white, okay, but they're not the same. Yeah, England oppressed the hell out of Ireland and Scotland too. Yeah, even to this day, Scottish people, for example, they call the British flag. They call it the butcher's apron. So you see, even among this group, there are differences. So not all white people are the same. Then I like to talk about my friends in Switzerland. These people live in nature. They live in the mountains. This about this time of the year, they're going up to the mountains and they're getting ready. Yeah, they're gonna stay up there for the summer, and they really live in nature, and they know, the clouds. Like if the clouds are doing certain things, they know what the weather's going to be like. The next day they can calculate the weather for the next day, depending on what the clouds look like right now. That's in tune with nature. And I guarantee you, most Indian people can't do that. And also, go to the reservation. I invite anybody, go to a reservation and drive through the towns. You're going to see trash all over the place. Does that sound like people who are at one with the earth? Does that sound like people who say they love grandmother earth, but yet they trash up the earth? When the res mechanics are changing oil, they just dump the oil in a certain place, totally fucking up the ground, but they don't care. They don't realize that that oil is going to eventually seep into the water system underground, but they don't care. Most Indians don't even give a shit about the environment, because if they did, I guarantee you that a camp that was set up in Cannibal, North Dakota, would have been 10 times bigger than it was. Yeah? Nobody gave a shit about the environment until these oil companies started coming around. I know this because I lived there. So you cannot tell me all Indians are good, because it's not true. Yeah? Good and bad does not belong to a skin color. Absolutely not. So, I like to add that. It's something I always want to say, because um, people have this this tendency, yeah, to especially. I just want people to be aware that the racism is also coming from Indians too. It's not just coming from white people. It's also coming from Indians. So I really don't like it when Indian people, when they write things on Facebook like, well, that's the way white people are. That's the way the Wasicu are, and that's bullshit. And they say the word Washichu as if it's a bad word, and it's not. Yeah, the word means fat takers, but people create really racist stories behind that, and that's not even true at all. Yeah, in the Lakota way, usually, um, when you have a name for a group of people, usually there's a really funny story behind it. The reason why is because humor is crucial to our existence. And when you can tease yourself, it shows you how emotionally healthy you are. And it's a way to extend fellowship to other people by getting them to laugh and relax, and to start a good conversation. We're not serious all the time. Humor is really, really important. And I'm not tarking. I'm not talking about sarcasm. Yeah? Sarcasm is an unhealthy thing. I'm talking about humor. Yeah? That's really important. Almost all names for different Lakota groups have a funny story behind it. The reason why, I'm going to say it a second time, the reason why is because humor is often used in extending fellowship to people. This is the reason. So let's look at one, for example. Sicangu. These are the people who live on the Rosebud and Lower Brule Sioux reservations. Yeah, they live on two reservations. Now, see, um, is it Sichon? I think it's your thigh. Yeah, and Ru is burnt. So Sichonhu means burnt thigh. So now, how did that? How come? Why? Why does it have that name? Burnt thigh. Well, you see, long time ago, long time ago, thousands of years ago, all the tribes in the Great Plains, they had this agreement that once every 10 years they burn the prairie in their territory. The reason is because it helps the wild wheat to continue to grow. It the the ashes or whatever that go into the ground, this is giving nutrients, it's giving nitrogen to the ground so that things continue to grow. If they didn't do this, it would become a desert. So this is why they did that. Yeah? So that buffalo always have something to eat and the other animals always have something to eat. Okay? And that we have something to eat so that everybody can live. Yeah? That's that is the reason that's the reason why they did this. Unipikta chale chamuelo. Yeah, that's the reason why. They do this so that people can live. All right? So, one summer they were doing this. The Sicangu people where they had an idea. They say, "Hey, okay, let's split into two groups, and what we'll do is we'll start on opposite sides, and we'll start the fire, and then we'll push it, yeah." and, and here it something went wrong, yeah, and I don't know, maybe somebody had trouble with left and right or something, but they ended up burning themselves into a circle. Yeah, the fire was all around them, and they bumped into each other, and they said, "Hey, what are you guys doing here? You're supposed to be over there." He said, "Oh, you're supposed to be over there." They said, "Oh, for crying out loud, we burnt ourselves into a circle." They said, so, so they had no choice. If they're going to live, they have to run through the fire as fast as they can. So when they ran through the fire, guess what? They got burnt thighs. See, it's a funny story. Yeah, it's a story meant to make people laugh. And that's how they got their name, Sichongu Lakota Oeateki. So, you see, the humor is always used, or often used, I should say, uh, to in making a name for a group of people, and it's used in a way to extend fellowship to others. Really old Lakota naming custom. Today, most people don't know that. I'll explain why later, okay? But there is a reason why today most people don't know that. Okay, so when they were making the word for white people, they used this same concept, just like for the word Sicangu, yeah, has a funny story. So the Lakota people created a funny story for making a name for white people, and the reason why was to extend fellowship. The same concept. So in this story, two white guys were on the wagon train that was heading out to Oregon, and for some reason or whatever, these two guys woke up and maybe they got drunk or something, and I don't know, maybe they were at Brokeback Mountain. Or someplace like that. These two guys woke up in the afternoon. Here, everybody was gone. So they're just laying out there in the prairie, and so they got up and they didn't know what to do. Yeah, they were trying to find the wagon train, but they couldn't. Yeah, they didn't have any horses or anything. They're on foot. So they're just wandering the prairie, not knowing what to do. Can't find water or anything, and after walking for a long, long time, they saw some smoke in the distance. So they went that direction, and they saw a Lakota camp. And here, they went a little distance, near the camp, and they were watching. They were saying, "What should we do?" And they said, "Let's just watch." They said, "There, maybe they can steal some food or something." Yeah. So at the edge of the camp, there was this grandma, and she came out of her teepee, and she had something, and she was obviously making a soup, and she had something boiling. And in those days, we used dried buffalo stomachs for soup kettles. Yeah. So she was uh, putting stuff in the soup, and they saw her put something big in the soup. They didn't know what it was. They assumed it was meat. Yeah. So they thought, oh. Yeah, so they were really hungry. Yeah. So they waited, and then she went inside her teepee. So they ran over there. They had sticks, and with their sticks, they reached in and grabbed this thing out, and they took off. And she came out with a piece of meat, yeah, buffalo meat. She was gonna throw it into the soup kettle, and here she said, "Hey, who took off with my washi?" She said. Washing is animal fat. Yeah, they use that to flavor the soup. So she was hollering around, so everybody came running to her teepee, and they said, "What happened?" They said, "Somebody stole my washi." She said. So they were looking around, and here that somebody saw these two guys running in the distance, and they had something on the stick, and they had it up in the air. They're really running, and they all started laughing, and said those two guys probably thought they had a piece of meat in here. All that time, all they had was fat. So, so somebody else gave gave grandma a new piece of washing, yeah, for her fat. They just let those two guys go because they thought, "She's that's goofy." So that's now let's look at this in Lakota, okay? I said before, washing is fat, animal fat, okay? It's not like when a person is fat. That's chepa. That's something different, okay? Now, I'm talking about animal fat. That's called washing. Washing. All right? Ichu means to take, okay? Ichu means to take. You put those two words together, washing plus ichu equals Wasicu. It's how the word came to be, through a funny story. Yeah, and again, the story is used not to make fun, but to extend fellowship. Just like the word Sicangu, what I told you just a while ago. The same thing, same concept. So the word Washichu is not a bad word. Now, some Lakota races, they like to say, yeah, it means fat takers. That's because the white people take everything. They even take the fat. See, that's a racist thing to say. And that's not how this word was created. So when Lakota people are using the word Washichu in a derogatory way, they're disrespecting the ancestors who created that word, because they did not create that word in hatred. They created that word in the spirit of extending fellowship. So, all you Lakota people listening, if you use the word Washichu in a bad way, means that you're disrespecting your ancestors. And maybe you should learn how to speak your own language. Because that's another question, too. You know, people say they're Lakota, but what if you don't speak your language? Are you really Lakota if you don't speak your language? Because, see, language and culture are connected. You cannot have one without the other. You need both. It's just like you need to inhale and exhale to live. You can't just do one. If you just do one, you die. So it's the same way with language and culture. You need them both, because when you don't have one of them, you're going to have difficulty when you're dealing with cultural matters. This is what my mom used to always say, is that if you're going to speak Lakota, you have to think Lakota. That means you got to know the perspective. And the perspective is in the language. Yeah? So fluent speakers are more laid back than today's English speaking Lakota people. So Lakota language is really um, and also there's one more thing too. I'm forgetting. I just remembered that just because you can speak Lakota, that doesn't mean you know everything. Okay, because if you believe in good versus evil, then you're not speaking Lakota correctly. Because in the ancestral way, there was no good versus evil. When you look at our stories, there is no Satan. Now, some people like to say, well, Iktomi was a Satan. No, he wasn't. Iktomi was not a bad guy. He's a trickster. But that does not mean he's bad. It does not mean he's evil. Because through his stories, you learn something. It's equally as important to learn how to not do something, just as it is important as when you learn to do something. They're both important. This is why, in the ancient Lakota way, when you learn from your mistake, it's not a mistake anymore. It's a teacher. Now, not many Lakota people think like that today. When they make a mistake, they don't learn from it, and they just let it go. That's a missed opportunity. So how did we change? How did we lose that old way? Today, most people believe in good versus evil. And this is not natural, because nature is not this way. Everything in our spirituality comes from nature. And in nature, there is no good versus evil. It does not exist. That's what man has created to control others. That's a man-made concept. So that's why in our stories we don't have angels, we don't have demons, we don't have a hell, which also means we don't have a heaven either. We have something different. And it's not the happy hunting ground. It's something completely different. That's the ancient way. But not many Lakota people believe that. Most Lakota people are very Christian influenced. Just look at their Facebook accounts. Wakatanka has blessed me today. Wakatanka is not God, but most Lakota people think it is. Wakatanka is an organization, and there's more than one. Yeah, there's several organizations, and they're each called Wakatanka. The reason why is the goal is the same, but they operate in different ways. Neither one is more important than the other. There's no good versus evil. They just do things different. So we really do not have a one God concept. That doesn't exist. And this is another one that's really hard for today's Lakota people to understand. In the ancient way, there's 7 genders. 7. 3 physical bodies, but 7 genders. The physical bodies are male, female, and there are people who are born with both. This is natural. In the Lakota way, this is natural. There's nothing wrong. This is actually sacred. When a person is born both male and female, it's a sacred being. So you see, look at that. There's at least 3. Okay? This is hinting at something. In the Lakota ancient way, there's at least 3 perspectives to everything. And because of that, there's no good versus evil. But in the man-made modern thinking, there's only 2. Yeah? I'll explain this better in a few minutes. I'll explain it more in depth. But so most Indians today, they think in this 2 perspective system. So Indian people today, when they see, for example, a transgender person or a gay guy or a lesbian, when they see those people, they make fun of them. Today's Indian people, they make fun of transgender and homosexual people because they only see things in two perspectives. So for those people, it's just man and woman. That's all you can be. So they don't understand that there's more than that. In the ancient way, there are 3 basic physical bodies: male, female, and I guess the third one you could say, what's that term? Hermaphrodite. They're born with both. Okay? This is natural in the Lakota way. From those 3 physical bodies, we get 7 genders. You have your basic man, basic woman. Okay, just basic. And that's basically the Christian way. Yeah, man, woman, that's it. Anything else is evil. Yeah. And that's why today's Indians make fun of transgender and homosexual people. Because most Indians are either Christian or they're Christian influenced today. And there's a reason why. I'll explain that soon. Okay? But in the ancient way, before European contact, We didn't see it like that. Yeah, there were three basic physical bodies: male, female, and a hermaphrodite. And like I said, first of all, you have your man with the male perspective and a physical woman with the female perspective. Those are your first two. And then you have it switched. You have a man with a woman's perspective and a woman with a man's perspective. These are our transgender people. There's nothing wrong. It's just the way they are. Okay? This is natural. Because in the very first Lakota star knowledge concept is reality begins within. That's inside of your where you think, where your mind is. This is where reality begins. This is the way the universe was created. Okay? So if a boy thinks like a girl, then he's a girl. So he will be a she. People in the community will regard that person as a girl, as a female. Same thing for the girl who has the perspective of a man. She will be seen as a male. There's nothing wrong with that. So we had our transgender people, and we treated them just like we treat anybody else because it's natural. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it happens. Okay? So there's four of them that we just described. Now we have sometimes a male body that has both the perspective of a man and a woman. They have both perspectives. Okay? And then you have a female body that also has both male and female perspectives. See how that works? So that's six genders. The seventh one are the hermaphrodites. And they have many variations. Some appear more masculine, some appear more feminine. Some have both perspectives of the man and woman, some just have one. So there's variations there, okay? But basically, it's seven basic genders from three physical bodies. And it all begins in the mind. Reality begins within. Most Lakota people cannot comprehend that because we've gone through some experiences in our history that changed our way of thinking from what I just described to something that is more closed minded. So that's why today's Native people have a tendency to make fun of transgender people. And if they see a hermaphrodite, they call them a freak. They make fun of gay people. They beat them up. Yeah. I was reading some comments on Facebook last year about in Cannibal, North Dakota, and there was a young Cheyenne River guy. He's about 30 something years old, maybe 40 something, and there was a picture of him cussing out a pipeline worker in Cannibal, North Dakota, and he called him a winkte. He used the word winkte in a derogatory way. Winkte is a man, and he can either have a female perspective or he has the male and female perspective. This is a winkte. Wing is short for wian. Kte is to become. Kte has two definitions. One is to become, and another one is to kill. But if it means to kill, it's used in a different way. Okay. But when you use it in the word winkte, it means to becoming. Okay? About to happen, future tense. Okay? So, in the Lakota language, Winkta is a really good thing. It's a sacred thing. But this young Cheyenne River guy with a French last name called this pipeline worker, and he also called Trump Winkte. See, he's using it in a derogatory way. So to this young Cheyenne River Lakota guy, gay people are seen as bad in his eyes. And he tries to say he's really traditional. This shows you he does not know his culture and he doesn't know his language. He's an asshole. So you see, not all Indians are good. This is a really good example of a dumbass Indian. And there's a lot of them like that today. Yeah, a lot of them, they think this way. They belittle gay people. They belittle transgender people. They make fun of them. This is not our way. That's not the way of the ancestors. In the ancestral way, transgender and gay people are, these are all accepted. That's part of nature. You cannot define nature. Nature just is. It just happens. Sometimes we don't understand it, but that's okay as long as we learn from it. That's the most important thing. But when you make fun of somebody just because they're not like you, that means you're scared of them. That means you're scared, period. So, that's an example of how you have young native people today that really think they're proud to be Indian, proud to be native, but they make fun of people that don't fit their Christian way of thinking. See how stupid that is? That is incredibly stupid. The guy's last name was Dupree. That's all I'll say. And he's married to my cousin, whose last name is Clown. And they live in the West Coast, I think Oregon, Washington, somewhere over there. That's where they live. For those of you who are my relatives listening to this show, you can figure that out. You know who I'm talking about. That guy's an asshole. That's an example of a bad Indian. So I really don't like seeing that. When native people are, when they say, "Well, that's the way of the Wasicu." Well, those Wasicu people are that way. Well, that's how come they're Wasicu. That's bullshit. That's racism. And when you are racist, you do not really see all of reality. You're not really living in reality. You're living in a fucked up fantasy world. Yeah, you're closed-minded. This is not the way of our ancestors. I just want that's very important to understand. So I see that so much. And to me, it's sad because it's showing me that Native people are really going downhill fast. That we hate others just because of the color of their skin and their sexual orientation. When our ancestors were not this way. Yeah? Our ancestors never made fun of gay people. And yes, they existed. Our ancestors never made fun of transgender people. And yes, they existed too. Always existed. Because this is the way nature is. There's nothing wrong with them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. It's natural. They were born this way. That's a good segue into one of my favorite songs here. Reality begins within. So, how you communicate, that's a reflection of what's going on inside of you. So, if you're healthy, your communication's going to be healthy. Yeah. And like I said, as you experience things, you express the emotion, and then you start learning from it, or you enjoy it if it's a blessing. And that's how you develop emotionally. Then you develop spiritually. You cannot develop spiritually without developing emotionally. Yeah, you need them both. And then you see that there are at least three perspectives to everything in life. Sometimes there's more than three, but the most important thing is that you look for three first. Once you find three, if something has more than three, then you'll see it. Yeah, but look for three first. And then you realize that it's not about good or bad, it's about is this something I can learn from, or is this something that I can enjoy, or is this something that just is peace, or it confirms something I already know. That's what it's about. Yeah? But there's people who don't take care of themselves. And therefore, what happens there is that they have this tendency to look at something and they only look for the parts they like, and then they say that's good and anything else is bad. So they lump everything into two groups. And one group, they make it an enemy. They hate it. Yeah? And that's how man creates good versus evil. Then they got really complex about it, even to the point of developing this belief system that includes a God to say that they can use to say well he knows everything, he's perfect. They even say it's a guy, yeah, and say and so he's on he's our God, and so he's perfect, and so that means we're better than you. See, it's just like little kids playing in the playground here. And then they assign the bad side a bad god, which is Satan. And then they build up all kinds of beliefs to support that. That next come demons and angels, and then they say things like, if you're not with me, then you're against me. And that's, again, really disrespectful to say that, because it's always putting things into just two opposing factors. Or then they'll say, if you're not part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. Again, bullshit. Yeah, that's bullshit, because that's still putting things into two perspectives. Nature is not this way. Even in nature, there's daytime and there's nighttime. But does that really happen? Does it all of a sudden it's just dark, and all of a sudden it's just light again? No. There are two connecting points where the day connects into the nighttime. That's dusk, where you don't see the sun, but you still see its light. That's the connection point. That's a sacred time. And then again, at dawn, before the sun rises, but you can see the sunlight. That is a second sacred time. That's another sacred time. These are 4 points here. Yeah. So you see, day it's not suddenly sunny and then all of a sudden, ching, it's nighttime. It doesn't happen like that. Yeah. There's an in between. That's how nature is. That's how the universe is. So what makes you think it's just day and night? It's not. Therefore, it's not just, this and that. It's not just two things. It's more than that. Yeah? So see, even nature sees that. And when you live in a healthy way, you see that. But people who only see two things, they don't acknowledge these two times when the sky is orange and red. They don't acknowledge that. Yeah? Even though it's right there in front of them. They don't acknowledge it. They only acknowledge the daytime and the nighttime. See? Dualism. And part of this saying I only like this, that also includes, they only want to feel one certain emotion. Some people only want to be happy. Some people only want to be angry. Some people only want to be sad. Some people only want to be scared. All of that is an emotional illness. It's an addiction. People they only want to feel that one emotion, and they'll do anything to remain in that emotion, and that leads to illness. Eventually, you're going to get physically sick. Yeah? Your mind is going to be trying to think of things to do so that you can only feel that one emotion, and that's you're becoming an addict. Yeah? Your thinking becomes addictive now, and eventually it's going to lead to abuse. First, self-abuse, and then abuse of others. Sometimes that happens subconsciously and we're not even aware of it. That's why it's important to take a look at yourself to see. Then you find it if you are. Yeah? So that's duality, when people only want to be in one emotion, and when they do that, they trap it. That means they cannot develop emotionally, which means they cannot develop spiritually either, no matter how many ceremonies they go to. No matter how many pipes and Indian names and drums and rattles they have, they cannot develop spiritually. As long as you believe in good versus evil, you will never develop spiritually, because that's duality, and that's keeping you in one emotion. So you say things like, think only positive, happy thoughts, as if positive was good. Yeah, for some people, and they get a pregnancy test that says positive, that doesn't make them feel good. Or when they do a HIV test and the results come back positive, that's not a good sign. Yeah, you see what I mean? Positive and negative do not mean good and bad, and that's not the only two things. There's also neutrality, and then there's more. But it's more than just positive and negative, and that's not good and bad. And people make that mistake of assigning good to positive and bad to negative. Yeah, and that's what dualistic people do. They assign labels of good and bad to everything, and then they stay away from it, saying, "You're evil. You come from the devil. Stay away from me. My God will destroy you, because my God is perfect." Nothing in this universe is perfect, because that's an illusion. That's terrorism. That's extremism. Yeah, the perfection is not the goal, because it doesn't exist. That's not what life is about. Life is about living. Yeah, it's not about, oh, I wonder where I'm going to end up. No, it's about paying attention to right now and actually living and enjoying what's happening right in front of you. Sure, you can make plans for the future, but you got to be in the present moment overall, so you don't miss all the fun and learning that's happening right now. See, these are foundations, yeah, of what Lakota Star Knowledge is about. It's about, getting to know yourself, so that everything inside of you is nurtured. All the connections inside of you are nurtured because of your healthy lifestyle, and that helps you to be at peace within yourself. Now you're able to be at peace with everything around you. Now remember, being at peace does not mean you agree. Sometimes you'll disagree with others, and that's okay. As long as you don't try to force each other to, you know, to believe each other's beliefs or try to prove the other one wrong, then you're okay. You can agree to disagree, and that's still peace. It's still respect. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, there were prison camps in the beginning, and this is a situation where we couldn't leave. We were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us, and we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that, but once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it, and then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. Yeah. So what we got on the reservation was bullshit food. Yeah, it was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. And these, as I said earlier, these are the four parts of the South. So with the four parts of the South being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota Star Knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. Yeah. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to the Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so, there was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside they weren't. They were Star Knowledge people. Yeah? They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who
maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down, to certain people like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I have this show, and I'm sharing it with you because this regards the sacred center, and we all have that. Yeah, this is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikje Oyate thing. Ikje Oyate means human being. When you live this way, as I said in the beginning, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German or a Japanese or an African. You communicate as a human. Yeah, that's really important to know. So that's how it was back then. Yeah. Now remember, I said that the priest said to the Indians, "We will help your children." So they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. Yeah, the pay was really low, so they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter, and they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered, they were killed, they were raped, they were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all of these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with, because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult healthy role models to emulate. And remember, I said these children were told that their families were all dead, so they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people because their own people were saying, "Oh, you're too white. You act like a white man." So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turn to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turn to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development. Because the parents don't know how to do it. Yeah? All they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. We're incredibly, as a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation.